But we feel that we really want them to feel supported from that very, very first day. And so just having this Google Classroom, they loved it. They loved the connection, just being able to kind of talk with one another. So helping to facilitate the networking, I think, is probably the most important resource that we can provide.
Interesting. Yeah, has anyone any other questions in terms of how they relate to the work? I was also thinking about our friends and teachers in the Southern Hemisphere and how the calendar, you know, how the Moir's model would be adapted to not refer to months per se, but in terms of, would it be more helpful for the global educator to look at the in terms of months, month 1, month 2, in terms of the academic calendar, if that makes any sense. When you're, then I don't know if you'd like to respond, but we actually, do you know what, we have another one here. Valerie Peters, you're very welcome. Excellent research on mentoring programs through the Society of Music Teachers Education during the last few years. So that's a comment there. Lexi, thank you for your work. I wonder that, as you mentioned in the paper, that instrumental teachers or other band teachers face performance and concerts, and these became their main pressure and pushed them into that cycle. How about the general? Yes, exactly. That was kind of speaking to my point earlier. What kind of pressures did they deal with? Were they exam focused or exam pressures like they would be in Ireland? We have state exams. What kind of things that were they speaking to in terms of their pressures?
The general music teachers in my study had typically had some sort of big, huge school production with all of their students, typically a holiday concert or a spring concert or some sort of open house performance where all of the parents and community members would come. And those were the main pressures that they did discuss. I will bring up a really interesting point that one of the participants mentioned. One of my questions when I interviewed them was, do you feel that classroom teachers go through these experiences? I know you can't really speak for the classroom teachers, but comparing your experience to what you believe a classroom teacher might experience, do you feel like this is a pretty accurate framework? And one of the participants very astutely said, I think they probably experienced this cycle now related to standardized testing when you're talking about exams and all of the pressures in the United States now with standardized testing, and that they probably will go through this cycle completely leading up to those exams and feeling that pressure. So I think that definitely is a good point.
Great. Before I take Jenny Henley's one, another question, it relates to the relationship, I suppose, with their principals or administrators. In your presentation, you spoke about the relationship with the administration in order to help the young teachers. I wonder whether there was a correlation between their relationship and how supportive the principals felt or were towards the teacher and otherwise. That's something of interest to me from my own research, yeah. Did you find any correlation?
That's a great question for future research. I did not explicitly look into that. So some of them certainly did comment on the amount of support they felt from their administration. Those that did feel support would say things like, I do feel support, but that person still really doesn't completely understand. They felt a definite lack of understanding. And the one in the study who had a music specific mentor, her experience was quite different from all of the others. So that's the most kind of glaring difference I found there.
Lovely. Thanks for that. And we have Jenny, again, she was wondering in relation to question 2, I wonder how the model might be adapted to be more fluid and to address inclusivity. The first rule of inclusivity being meeting learners at their own starting points. So how does this align with the national model for teacher development?
That's a great question. And I believe that, you know, trying to fit everyone into one specific model of evaluation or performance expectation is an issue that we definitely have. And I believe, you know, that education is moving hopefully more and more towards meeting students where they are and where they begin. But I'm hoping that our states will work together. I know in the United States, we are working on our own state mentoring model. And to my knowledge, there's not not a strong national mentoring model. And that would be something definitely to explore.
Thank you. Thank you for that. There was a question there I missed about, like, what was the music objective, or the objective of the music lesson in school? Was it the grappling with the material, or was it cultivating values? It was something like that. I actually have missed the chat. It's gone above, but what would you, it's a very general comment. I'm sure it's hard to, that's more philosophical than anything else. Would you have any
That is very philosophical. I will say, in this, related to this particular study, I was in 20 different schools, 20 different programs, everywhere from very, very small town, rural Illinois, to bigger cities. And depending on the area and the philosophy of the program, that would differ from one to the next. And again, some of those high school, high intense, competitive performance programs, they had a very different objective than some in the other schools and other levels.
Thank you. Another one here from Francis. Thank you very much. With regard to the reflection time, which seems to be a key component of Moir's model, in terms of its ability to influence the next anticipation phase, I was wondering how participants defined what is meant by reflection in their own practices. For example, for Ava, reflection meant watching a video of herself, and I wanted to know how others would consider to be productive, reflective or reflexive activity prior to encountering the next anticipation phase.
Great. I think most of the participants in my study viewed reflection in very similar ways. They've been taught in their undergraduate programs that this is a very important thing to do. They know how to do this. It usually entailed watching videos of themselves teaching, watching recordings, taking time to go back and really analyze what went well, what did not go so well, and allowing that to help influence the planning of the next lesson is really how they framed reflection in this. And then also in the larger sense, and I believe what Moir means is reflecting upon the whole year and thinking about that for the next year. And many of the participants in this study said, they couldn't wait until summer and they could have that time and that space to really think about how the year went and do the large scale reflection. But most spoke about that on a daily basis and thinking day to day.
And I see here Smarrow has a question about the role of the university in this cycle. How would they support and interfere or intervene in the mentorship relationship between the teacher and student?
Yes, I think that's where we have a lot of room to grow. And I'm just speaking now for my own university, not for anyone else's. Certainly, I know there are some strong mentoring programs already in place out there, looking for ways to maintain connection to those first year teachers. And I know for us, it's oftentimes at our state music education association conference that happens in January of the following year, that they all come together, we all get together, have coffee and talk. And that's also where the genesis of this idea came from. That was the first time I had communicated with, I had reached out to them, but many of them had not even responded to me until they saw me in person and they really had the time and the space to sit and they really wanted to talk about this. So I think establishing and maintaining that connection from the day they finish student teaching all the way up to that first day of teaching that's something that we're working on strengthening in our program.
Brilliant. Being conscious of time, I know I'll just take one more comment and a question and to wrap it up. Valerie Peters wanted to share that NAFME was working on something like this, a national mentoring program, just to put it out there. I'm sure you might be aware of this. Great comment. And finally, Jake, in supporting teachers, what stage do you think we should focus on to have the most impact? Survival, reflection, or where do you think our interventions for these teachers should be targeted? If at all, yeah.
Ooh, all of them. Honestly, probably if I had to choose one, I think survival. I find that that's where they really struggle, and it's at that, and like I was just speaking of, that during the summer and preparing for that first year, and then through those first weeks of school, that's where I think a lot of the burnout and the overwhelming feelings were coming for the participants in my study anyway. So if I had to choose just one, I think survival, and going along with that phase is the overwhelming administrative tasks and curricular tasks that they're faced with. So those are all kind of more specific areas that I think we can help prepare them for.
Thank you, Danelle. And actually that third question that you're actually alluding to there regarding the survival stage seems like a good and a perfect segue to introduce our next presenter. So thank you, Danelle, for all that work. So, and our second presenter, Angela Mullins, actually might offer a way of offering some insights into how you might address the survival stages in her paper, which is titled Student Perceptions of Competency Development in a Project-Based Music Classroom. And her work highlights obviously the value of project-based learning in the classroom. So please join me in welcoming Angela from the Africa Open Institute for Music Research and Innovation from South Africa. And I know we've had many questions just from the chat before, so please continue to engage with these questions, and we will download the chats, and we can continue the conversations into the Facebook page as well. So that's something important to mention. So with that, Angela, whenever you're free to take the floor and you feel comfortable, take it away and off you go.
Great. Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here with everyone today, and you know, thank you for taking the time to attend this session with me. I'll tell you a little bit about my my study that I did. I'm in the midst of a PhD, which is quite something to also be in the midst of a global pandemic. So I'm feeling a little bit of pressure right now. I'm sure you can all understand. But my case study was a year-long classroom-based research study. So I was acting as both teacher and researcher within the classroom. And one of my main focuses was looking at the role of project-based learning within the music classroom. Our school, it's a private school in Johannesburg. It caters to quite an affluent portion of the society. We really push a future-focused curriculum. So looking at how to prepare our students for a interconnected, globalized, technologically advanced society. So I actually teach in a portion of the school called the Future Focused Center, looking at developing these 21st century competencies. So I ran my case study with a group of grade 7 students, so they are sort of 12 turning 13, and there were 23 participants, and we went through a series of exercises really based on the school curriculum, the prescribed curriculum, but just approaching them in a project-based way rather than a traditional way. So what I mean by project-based learning is that it's really inquiry-based, and the students are driving everything that's going on in the classroom. It's all about their voice and offering them choice and the ability to drive and control their education. I always love to make connections with the papers that come before and after mine, and this idea of reflection, I think, is so critical for students to be able to kind of think about what they've done and what worked well and what didn't, and obviously very collaborative, working together, and this idea of design thinking, going around in cycles, building on what came before, not kind of having the permission to make mistakes. Mistakes are seen as amazing things in the project-based learning community. It's this idea of, I didn't get it right yet, but next time I will. And then obviously self-assessment plays a vital part in project-based learning, and this idea of reflexivity. So on the slide that you can hopefully see on your screen, I've just laid out my my theoretical framework, which is based on Feingold and Nossa Batalo's framework that they established. It was done as an interdisciplinary literature review, and they've used these 5 broad headings, which I found very valuable, just in terms of grouping the competencies that we were exploring. And then my paper dealt with the interviews and the ways that students perceive their own growth, and then obviously through a whole series of rubrics and observations that I did, I've also just given you a little sense of the actual data that I observed in terms of their own growth. So I established a baseline competency map for them, and then when we threw them in the deep end in terms of setting out this project where all of a sudden they had to design their own instrument, you can see that particularly their ability to execute, that's, you know, actually just getting things done and regulating their own behavior took a bit of a knock, but all in all they showed growth in each of the competency areas throughout the project. So that's just a tiny little overview, but I'm really excited to hear some questions and see what everyone else thinks.
Thank you so much, Angie. And again, it's so timely, especially here now in the Irish context. And while we're waiting for more questions, I just wanted to ask a question about, because in Ireland we're moving from, there's a huge overhaul to classroom-based assessments in the junior cycler and middle school. So I was curious about the role that mixed ability grouping had in this creative process, or in the process that you used, using the baseline competency maps. Can you speak to about the ways students reacted to that, or was there any pushback? I'm thinking of Mike, for example, who had a bit of a problem. How did you negotiate that, and how did that work out?
Yes, so it with mixed. We had some kids who really ran with it, and kids who just showed such tremendous growth, kind of lifted by the people around them. Obviously, with different personalities, there were clashes here and there, but I saw those clashes as opportunities for them to learn how to sort that sort of thing out. I've got masses of paperwork that they generated through the project, and I found this wonderful little tally of, you know, like somebody getting points and somebody getting minus points, and they developed this whole little system to keep track of how they work together, and just watching the systems that they generated to figure out how to interact, I think is so important. I know, just kind of trying to work within a school and developing my own interpersonal skills, it's such a valuable thing for them to learn, and to be able to sort of figure out in a less threatening manner, in terms of a project, and particularly I find in the music class they are so open and so ready to engage and have fun and to experiment, so I think it's a good place for them to figure that sort of thing out.
Great. And in terms of the methodology, which I found very innovative as well, Francis asks, I was wondering how you measured, for example, what was the criteria for identifying the students' competencies in intrapersonal skills, capacity for change and all these things, prior and after the designing and execution phases, and whether your students agreed with how you assess them. Yeah, that's a different point really, but yeah, how you measure that.
Yeah, so I developed a series of very in-depth rubrics. I spent quite a bit of time leading into this case study, just developing the vocabulary around these competencies with the students. You know, you say, okay, everybody, I want to see perseverance, or I want to see self-regulation from you. And they didn't really have a solid grasp. We kind of know what that is in an airy-fairy sort of way, but just actually defining those competencies was a really important part of starting this project. And I did a little, I think I actually included a little picture of the worksheets that we did, where the students actually went through this. What does it mean to be a critical thinker? You know, what does it mean to be creative? And then I worked their wording into the rubrics. So they had essentially set up the criteria for, you know, what does it mean to be creative? What does it mean to be a critical thinker? And then they were self-assessing all the time. So these competency maps that I've got here it's basically a visual of the rubrics, both my rubrics and the self-assessment rubrics, and quite a lot of peer assessment as well. So they were all contributing their own ideas.
Yeah, Angie, I mean, the project itself really embodies constructivism, you know, it's a perfect example of it, really. And actually, there's another question here relating to, from Jake, relating to what was your experience of teaching when you took on the role as teacher researcher? So yeah, that's in terms of how, so like if you were going again at it, or what were your biggest challenges, or what would you do differently perhaps? You know, what was that role? How did it differ?
So I remember saying this to my supervisor, that I, set out to do this project in order to develop my students' 21st century competencies, but boy, was it an exercise for me as well. Particularly, the flexibility and the adaptability and problem solving and all of those skills. It was an enormously challenging year. I think I mentioned in the video that I did that I was really looking forward to 2020 to have a better, easier year of teaching, and it didn't quite work out that way with COVID and moving online and everything. But yeah, it was incredibly challenging being a teacher researcher. I had to sort of step back quite a bit, just as a facilitator in this project-based role. I love to be able to step in and help my kids and show them, have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? But I just, within the project, had to stop myself from doing that. Let them struggle, let them grapple with ideas, which I think then sort of also assisted me as researcher, because I could then use that energy that I wanted to put into helping them into rather observing and recording the results. So that continues to be a challenge, even now when I'm not recording my results as research, to just not be as involved as a teacher. Let them struggle, because they grow so much through that process.
And Kun, thank you for that, has another question. Why did you choose these indicators specifically? Analytic skill, interpersonal skills, ability to execute, and capacity of changes. Yeah.
There are so many models out there. I think we all quite aware of the P21, the 4 C's. That was one of the models I looked at. I just found this kind of the Feingold Notarbartolo model to be quite it just encompassed a lot, and it was an interesting way to look at these 5 different areas that the 4 C's didn't quite cover. So it was a lot of research, and this was the model that I felt was the most fitting and allowed me the most sort of scope in terms of looking at competencies.
And thank you. Pam asks the question, why is the first question set as a binary of what is lost or gained? What if there is more diverse and even a multiplicity of things that don't fit into the either or argument, given that what it means to be X will be culturally diverse and multiple? Yeah.
Yes, no, absolutely. I think there's a whole lot within that question. Just kind of in setting that question, kind of this idea of losing stuff is it's an incredibly time heavy project to set out on. I could normally teach, these are the instrument groups, this is where we categorize instruments. That could maybe take me, a lesson or 2. We could cover that content. This took nearly 3 months to do this project. So it does mean cutting a lot of other content out of the curriculum. And I feel like you drop content, is almost quantity versus quality in terms of the kind of teaching you end up doing.
Yeah, I thought, is there a threat to the disciplinary knowledge, or what is, on whether that can be balanced? I think the balance word, it's the comes back again, really. But Jennifer Maselli has another question. It kind of relates to my opening question about the students' growth and their ability to manage. What did you notice about students' growth, managing the conflict resolution among their peers and that?
Yeah, I think just giving them sort of the vocabulary to understand what it meant to be a good communicator. Normally they would say, oh, you know, I'm talking, I'm putting my point across, I'm a good communicator. But this idea of actually listening or talking in a way that makes somebody else understand what you're saying, and just because you're talking loudly doesn't mean you're communicating well. It's which I think when you're 13 seems to be the general idea. But this idea of explaining yourself in a way that somebody else can understand you, the idea of collaboration where not everybody has to be involved in all the parts. You can look at your strengths and your weaknesses and see where you fit into a project. And once they had a good understanding or a better understanding of what those kind of interpersonal skills actually were, they were much better off at practicing and demonstrating them, and it made for better group work. So this was essentially the middle cycle of my we have 3 terms across the school year. So this was the middle project. The third project that they did right at the end of the year was essentially a little court case that they did where they were working on a plagiarism suit. So looking at you know, a song that had been accused of plagiarism and either defending or prosecuting. And there I saw enormous growth from this project. So throughout the course of the project, I saw growth, but within the new project, it was also fantastic to see how they dealt with each other. And it was great to see.
Great. Look, unfortunately, we can't get to any more questions, but please, we'll continue the conversations. There's many more questions there, and we'll continue on to the Facebook page, if not during the chats. But thank you so much, Angie, for all those insights. A wonderful project, and like all the rest of our papers throughout the seminar, really thought-provoking and timely, really timely. So thank you again, and we'll move on to our third and final paper of this session, paper 11 on the schedule. It's Marsha, Baxter and Hyun, and their paper is titled Creating New Conversations and Musical Soundtracks at the Intersections of Music Education and Ethnomusicology. Please welcome the presenters, Marsha Baxter from New York University and Teachers College, Columbia University, and Hyun, SUNY College of Staten Island, Adjunct Assistant Professor. So whenever you feel ready, you can unmute yourself and take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marie-Louise, and thank you to the team of MISTEC commissioners. So nice to see you, Marie-Louise, after a few years. Our paper's focus is a research performance project that is the centerpiece of comprehensive musicianship, a graduate course at Teachers College. Students select a piece from an unfamiliar musical tradition, a genre, a style, and document their learning process through informal blogs. Blog prompts invite them to articulate their rationale for their topic choice and to detail what they're uncovering and discovering along the way. This might include culturally specific concepts, ways the repertoire is learned and taught by cultural insiders. The assignment takes inspiration from Barbara Lundquist's account of learning by ear an unaccompanied native lullaby from a recording, an experience that really set in motion her investigation of musics of the native Northwest. Her example illustrates how learning a simple lullaby can offer a cultural encounter with people and their music that is real and unforgettable. It also models so beautifully investigative beginnings. Hanji?
Well, yes, thank you, Marsha. As a doctoral student at TC, I participated in this project and explored the musical tradition of my own country, Korea, through the gayagum. So from the first step of searching for a gayagum teacher to perform in front of many audiences, the whole learning and performing process was challenging. but it was foremost exciting and educational. This project allowed me to explore, tinker, and discover through my own explorations rather than simply accept them. So I love the fact that I was given a chance to explore the connections between human cultures on the one hand and musical theories and traditions on the other hand. I learned that becoming familiar with any culture takes years and calls for tremendous effort. Nonetheless, I believe that delving deeply into the music of other cultures is a great way to acquire a knowledge of more than just their music. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And while we're waiting on the some questions to come up, again, very timely, given the Black Lives Matter discourse and the decolonizing music narrative, reminiscent and echoing all the conversations throughout the seminar and last week. I love this idea, the multifaceted view of learning through performance, and the Irish fiddling reference to Tommy Gunn that you made in your beautifully crafted video really resonated with me too. I acknowledge that time was a limitation during this project, in that it happened over a 4-week process. So I was curious about the extent to which you might change or amend this project if you were to go again at it, or if you were thinking of putting it online next year. Do you think the learning experience could transfer and be equally meaningful? That's something I was thinking about.
If it were online?
If it were a lot on or face to, oh yeah, sorry, yeah.
Hunji and I have actually talked about this to make this more of an ongoing, and what it does do is it's a springboard into often a much longer extended project. People become join ensembles to continue their study, and yeah, we've considered that. That's a great question, Marie-Louise.
Okay.
Yeah, actually it's ongoing. So for example, when we do this project, it's basically we are making our own community, you know, even for final project, we perform together, we share our learning process together. So for example, now we have a group chat with GroupMe, so we still keep in touch and we see where it's at right now. So yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And actually I have a question I'll address. Thanks for that. I have a question from Kun. Can you explain more about the traditional music Korea? May you show the kind of traditional Korean music that you mentioned, because I know there is a beautifully crafted video, so I might even of people playing and of yourself playing the Korean instruments. That might speak to that, Kun, to make sure you look at that video as well. But would you like to speak to that question, Wenji, about
Sure.
Korean music?
Sure. So for me, I'm Korean, but I never learned traditional Korean music notation or anything like that. So I took this opportunity as a great way to learn my own culture. So I start from something very basic, which is arirang. So arirang was the first thing that I learned. So I learned that like arirang there are so many different kinds of arirang depending on the region. So I start from that. And after that, I learned also about the modern, more complete contemporary piece that combine with other genre of music. But I start from learning Korean music, arirang. And yeah.
Brilliant. And as I said, the examples there of Korean music are on that video. So make sure you link in and see the video on Sketch. Another question from Fernando there. What do you think about making also links with the music of the students, actual musics, and also different kinds of music, not also the ethnicals, should I say, sorry.
So many are studying popular music, not just folk musics and traditional musics. Many branch out to study. It could be some kind of popular music as well, or ukulele, or a bass guitar, technique.
Yes, because I know Emily also asked the question, if anyone has similar experiences to hers. I have met her, she has been in situations where ethnomusicology is used to refer to African or local music. And what is your experience? I think it's more of a general comment to the attendees, but does anyone want to respond to that? Or Marsha or Hunji, based on your experience?
I think we see it more broadly, we see it more widely as really all musics.
Yeah. Because
It could be
Jenny,
studying a local music, something popular, something local. That was something my students, I'm teaching it right now, and when they read, it was so interesting, they read the Bailey article and they thought that they would have to travel. One doesn't have to travel to a place, to a country like Afghanistan to undertake this.
and that's what your paper speaks to, is this idea of culturally responsive pedagogy. So you're being responsive to the context and the students' experiences and what they bring to the classroom. So I think you address that in your paper as well. Jenny has a question or a comment. I learned Javanese gamelan as part of my doctoral research. I meant to learn it for a year as an ethnographic strand of research, but I ended up with a 4-year autoethnographic study, and I still play it now for 15 years later. So we use Javanese gamelan in prisons as a way to reflect back on self through exploring unknown music. Yeah, lovely insight there. Beautiful.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, really insightful. And Pam has a question, wondering about your views on how we should be decolonizing music education so as to embrace and feature voices and cultures of diverse cultures, and rather than the privileged. And I think that speaks to your questions there on the slide. Yeah. Have you any ideas? I know you posed the question for discussion, but what are your views on how you might start the conversations or the start decolonizing the music room?
And Pam, you know, I've turned that particular question over again and again. It's such an important one.
So,
and when I was, oh yeah, sorry.
So I think, for example, it is very important to teach in culturally responsive way. So I think that, you know, as she mentioned, I think the music education has been overly saturated with Western European traditions. And I believe that we should go beyond that. So for example, teachers could teach and share, like as Marsha did, like world music from all different cultures. And also teachers could help their students to represent and express their own cultures and identify by using music as a tool of expression, as I experienced.
Yeah, and I was thinking also about even looking at, as a starting point, the recruitment processes and the criteria used for recruiting teachers. You know, that's an obvious one, really, as well as one of the issues to explore. So Francis has another question here. Thanks here. So I've really enjoyed your paper. I really resonated with points 5 and 6 from Barbara's recommendation. I wonder, is there a question here? So which are teach what the tradition views as important, and using a teaching approach that is congruent with the traditional music being taught. Taking forth the lessons learned from your studies methodology, which emphasizes on learning and understanding unfamiliar musical cultures from the inside. What practices can you recommend to higher music education courses that teach world music, that can encourage an authentic exploration of ethnic musics, rather than what is often tokenistic? Yeah, great question, yeah.
Well, I certainly think the readings are important. I think it's important to read monographs like the Bailey. I think it's important to read Blacking. I think they offer examples of ways of thinking about music. What would you say, Hunji? And I think it's important, when possible, to study with cultural insiders. Right now, one of my students is studying with an Argentinian tango violinist. It's so important to unpack those ways of thinking about music, of those ways of those perceptions, and so often we come to it with these views that that are so filtered by our Western European views, and if we have to work to shed that, so that we begin to think about Chinese traditional music as not having harmonic cadences or and different expressions of yin and yang and those different aesthetic principles, and to listen to a West African piece and not necessarily try to find the downbeat, and to know that it's rhythmically organized in a very different way and through a cycle without downbeats. And I guess Lundquist, for me, I got to hear her at Teachers College play the recording, sing the recording of the Native Lullaby, and it was one of those moments that just set me on a different path, charted a new direction, and began my study of Native American music. And I began to work with a Native American performer, and through all of this through transcription, came to know it as came to know its improvisatory nature, something that cannot be captured on a staff. So.
Thank you, Marsha. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really insightful. And actually, in terms of resources, I personally found it was my first experience teaching a world music pedagogy class last semester to generalist primary teachers, and I found the resource, the world music pedagogy. I don't know whether that would be something which is it's by Roberts and Beagle. I thought that resource was helpful, which is grounded in listening and the various stages of listening. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but it gave me a good grounding for someone that wasn't very familiar with teaching it. So I'm not sure, Marsha, if you're familiar with that, or whether you'd encourage it, or.
I will look it up immediately.
Yeah, no, just a little bit of a whatever. That's just a recent thing. So, from my own perspective, because it's something I'm interested in as well. I'm recently interested in it. So, with that, I'm conscious of the time, and I know I have many more fantastic comments here along the way, and I know we have to have a break, but please keep these comments and conversations going. We're going to have a 15-minute break now, and so feel free to engage in private chats or on the Facebook page. And I really thank you so much to our three presenters today so far. It's been really fantastic, and so please feel free, take a break, have a cup of tea, and we will be back to you in 15 minutes. Thank you so much again, Marsha and Hyun, and we will see you after the break. Thank you so much. Thank you.